And we are live. So today on Lifestyle Medicine, I've got Tim Cartmell. Tim Cartmell is, boy, Tim, you've done quite a bit in the martial arts world. You've done traditional Chinese martial arts, traditional Chinese Kung Fu, and you've also bridged into the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu world. As of how many years ago did you bridge into that?
I started practicing Jiu Jitsu the beginning of 1995.
Okay, so it's been a while then.
Maybe 24, 25 years.
Okay. And I know who you are. I've read, the books that you've translated and whatnot, but there are probably some people in the audience who don't know sort of the magnitude of how big you are in this scene. Can you give just a little background to, your martial arts background, like how you got started, what what you did, where you are, where you've lived, that kind of thing?
Okay. So I started, I originally started, as a kid, I did some Taekwondo and that kind of thing, like a lot of kids. And then I started practicing Kung Fu San Soo when I was about 12. And I practiced that consistently all the way until I moved to Taiwan. I was 23, I guess, so probably about 12 years of San Soo practice. Then I moved to Taiwan and I started practicing. I had quite a few teachers, so I started practicing primarily the internal styles. I started off with Xing Yi and some Bagua, and I trained originally with Xu Hongji, and he passed away the end of the year. First year I was in, I trained with his son One for several more years, and then I started competing in Sanda in the Chinese kickboxing tournaments, and I did that for a year or two, and then I continued to train in Taiwan. I was there about 11 years, and then the last probably 4 years, I spent quite a bit of time in Beijing as well, practicing. And then I came back in the end of 94 and started practicing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, almost full time then. Wow. And I had a school.
Wow. Yeah. It's quite the career there. And you did some stunt work as well. Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
In Taiwan.
When I was in Taiwan. Yeah.
That's very cool.
I worked as I taught English, and like kind of every expat does, or people that live there. I taught English and did that kind of thing. And eventually I taught some martial arts, but I got into kind of by accident into the movie thing there. I was somewhere one day and there was a guy I knew, a Canadian guy I think he was, and he said, "Hey, I've been an extra in these movies. Do you want to come? They'll pay you whatever it was for the day, and you just sit around in a I don't know what, like in a bar scene or something." And I was like, okay. Yeah. And then as luck, when I was there, I could already speak Mandarin. And one of the stunt guys, they had an American stunt guy that didn't show up. And the stunt coordinator was like, "Hey, anybody know how to fall?" And I was like, "I know how to fall." That's how it started. So I made the scene, and then I got an agent saw me, and that's how. So I did stunts for several years there.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah, that's fun. Well, Tim, when I think when I first met you last year for the first time, and I said I was a fanboy for a long time. I'd read your stuff, and I followed you over the years. And what's really interesting is that you've gone sort of the traditional route in terms of studying Chinese internal Kung Fu, and which sometimes gets a bad name nowadays because of the woo-woo charge that it can carry with the chi projection stuff. But then you trained it traditionally from the fighting aspect, and then you bridged into BJJ, which has been sort of a prominent fighting art, especially nowadays with MMA and the UFC and just all of that. So can you talk about, like the value that you found in the Chinese martial arts from that fighting perspective, and then how that has linked and supported your Brazilian Jiu Jitsu practice, if it has at all?
So I talk about this quite a bit. This is a good question. It's a common question, especially among practitioners of kind of tradition, not only Chinese, but traditional styles in general. Yeah. So there's a couple things. The first thing is you have to realize the strengths and limitations of whatever you practice. So you could be the greatest, internal martial arts master in history, or the greatest boxer in history, and you'll have zero chance on the ground against someone who can grapple. Yeah. So, people have these kind of unrealistic expectations about, I understand principles, I can do anything, or no one can take me down. So you have to get that. That's kind of nonsensical thinking, although I run into it sometimes. So You have to be clear on what you do, right? Just like if you just grappled on the ground, you're not going to be able to kickbox anyone. So you have to be clear on what your art offers. And then after that, it's not if a martial arts survived for, even 100 years, let alone, hundreds and hundreds of years, there's got to be something to it that worked, right? I mean, they wouldn't have been passed down. Yeah. So people look at these things and they kind of see sometimes kind of the modern incarnation of it. Once it's not so much the art. Let's say an art's legitimate, the techniques are practical. Mm-hmm. It's not the name of the art or where it comes from. It's the way it's trained. So the training methodology will make all the difference. So you can imagine, like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, for example. Why do people get real useful skills very, very quickly? It's the techniques work, right? But it's the training methodology. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine if I had a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu student and all we did was shrimp up and down the mat and bridge on our own, and I maybe I show them a technique and they just do it cooperatively and there's no resistance, they'd have no ability. They wouldn't be able to use it for real. Right. So it's not like there's some kind of magic technical repertoire that anyone has. It's mostly the function of the training methodology. So you get a martial art, any martial art. So you look at, like when I fought in the ring in Taiwan, I primarily did Xing Yi Nei, right? Mm-hmm. And it worked just fine. I mean, it worked in Sanda kind of context. And there may be a few other things brought into it, but it was foundationally Xing Yi Nei. And my teammates and I, when we fought, it looked like Xing Yi Nei. It was what we did. Mm-hmm. But we sparred in every single class. So we did a lot of heavy conditioning. The other thing is, if you're going to fighting's an athletic event at its basics, right? So, you have to also, a lot of times not with combat sports, obviously, or fighting martial arts, but you'll also run into the idea sometimes that people have unrealistic ideas of what real fights are like, or even sport fights. So you have to be as strong as you can possibly get. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on one second.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
You have to be as strong as you can possibly get. You have to have great endurance. Endurance will often determine who wins a fight. So the physicality has to be in place in the first place. So you have to train really hard. Then you have to have a progressive, step-by-step methodology of fight training that starts off with virtually no resistance and moves into full resistance. Mm. If you don't have that, you're never going to maximize your potential as a fighter. And the other problem is it's the laboratory for your own physicality and your own talent. So just because, like, I could do something, right? And I teach you doesn't mean you can do it. I mean, you just couldn't do it. Sure. So maybe I'm just quicker naturally. Maybe I'm just strong. So you also need to learn a range of techniques in that style. And then you need to spar and apply them until you're like, wow, this is my game. This is what I can actually do, not my teacher could do. Maybe my teacher's got some exceptional ability, right? So all those things will only manifest if you're trying it for real. Mm-hmm. So the traditional styles you have to get a legit teacher and a, the real deal kind of thing or good stuff.
Sure.
But then it's how you train it. So, there's a lot of reasons. I talk about this a lot as well. There's a lot of reasons to practice martial arts. The original reason there's only one reason for martial arts to be created, and that was to fight, mm-hmm. right? It's in the name, right?
Right, martial art.
But in the modern world, I mean, you can practice martial arts for a lot of different reasons, even if you don't want to fight. Mm-hmm. You just have to be realistic on what your goals are and why you're doing it. So for a lot of people, it could be cultural. They like the culture, or it could be a method of self-discipline. It could be they want to get exercise. It could be, and they say, well, along the way, maybe I'll learn some useful self-defense skills, but it's not their focus. If you say, I want even real self-defense skills, that's a whole nother level of training. If you say, I want to fight in an MMA ring, that's a completely different level of training. But does it mean you have to be a pro or an amateur MMA fighter to get something out of it? No, of course not. And you can learn fundamental basic self-defense skills that maybe save your life one day with there's some hard training, but you don't have to kill yourself training. You never need to go to the level of, say, a pro ring fighter, mm-hmm. but you still have to train, at a certain level of difficulty and resistance. And that's the core of it. Now, if you say I want to practice something like Taiji for health, mm-hmm. that's fine. If you have a good form and you understand the correct way to move and the correct way to breathe and the whole mind-body unity and all that stuff. Yeah. There's nothing. I mean, it's fantastic, but you can't expect you're going to fight anybody, right?
Right.
So it's like they have fitness boxing. You go into a gym and you hit pads in a bag. You never really box. You're not a boxer. Mm-hmm. You got in shape with boxing training.
Right.
So, but there's nothing wrong with all those. So you need to be real. You need to be honest with yourself about what you want to do it for. Yeah. And you have to be honest with, if you say, I want real fighting skill, even real self-defense skill, it's a whole different level of conditioning than if you say, well, I just want to move around a little bit, I want to stretch a little bit, which is great, right?
Right.
But you have to, first and foremost, is on a self-assessment. Then you have to, of course, you have to be either fortunate enough or take enough time to find someone who can teach what you really want to learn, right? That actually can teach it. And then you just have to put the time in with the right method. And then everyone will get to a certain level. Even people that at first feel like they have no talent will get to a certain level of ability, right? And then the more talented might go further. And a lot of people, I feel, the tragedy of some of that is they have enough desire and they have enough discipline, and they don't really find anyone can teach what they really wanted to learn, right? So they waste time. Yeah. Or they find something that's really legit, but it's not what they wanted to learn. They just don't know yet.
Yeah.
So, this thing in the beginning of being clear about all that, and in the modern world, it's relatively easy though. You can go on the internet now, right? You can watch everyone you'd ever want to train with on YouTube. So it's not like you have to take someone's word for it, and 3 years later you're like, oh wow, that wasn't what you should be able to figure it out fairly quickly.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of you putting the time in and being realistic too. If you have a family and a job, and you're not going to be able to train 6 hours a day, so you say, oh, I'll train 4 hours a week, it'll just take me longer. So, all those things have to come into your into your expectations.
Well, you hit on a lot of great points, and there's a couple different directions I could go. But the one that came up just when you were talking about, I appreciate that you're saying that people don't have to necessarily train like an elite fighter to get the benefit of these arts, right? They don't have to do that. And I find that a lot of people are drawn to it and they want to study it without, a huge emphasis on fighting. But, and I would love for you to clear my understanding up on this. This is the way I have thought about it and the way it's sort of been relayed to me in the past, but I would love to hear your thoughts in terms of, in the traditions I've studied and some of the people I've studied with over the years, they've said something to the effect and variations of this, that the mechanics that you use for biomechanical strength, the mechanics that you use for eliciting power, for, having what you would call good martial strength, more or less, are very much aligned with the same alignments that will make your body physically healthy. So even if you're not going to train to be a fighter, quote unquote, you're still going to have the good body mechanics, more or less, of a fighter to have that health get into your body. Would you say that that's accurate? And if not, like, what would you add or take away from that idea?
It's absolutely accurate.
Okay.
Right? Let's leave it this way. Everyone has the same body. Correct. So, and then you have to look at it, analyze it from this point of view. There's one best way to use it, or there's a most efficient way to use it. Correct.
Yeah.
It can't be different for different things if they're the same movement or similar activities. So, it's like if you went to a good gym and you say you had a good personal trainer. The first thing a good personal trainer will do is not say, lay on the bench press and we'll start putting weight on. He's going to teach you correct form, or else you're going to hurt yourself.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So it's the same idea. So correct form is correct form. So if you're learning, if you're trying to, for example, in a martial art, and also it's objective. It's not a subjective idea. Right. You get to hit stuff, or you get to wrestle with someone, or you have somebody at least push on you and test your structure. Right?
Right.
Is it stable or is it not? There is no. Although I've had people before debate me on things with when they're not stable and they have these excuses and they talk. It's stable or it's not. It's stronger or it's not.
Yeah.
So there's going to be an optimal way to like generate force and maintain stability and all that kind of thing, right? And that's going to carry over to everything. It's the same. So if you can move well, you can move. Everyone recognizes it as well. You don't have to be a classically trained dancer to see who can dance and who can't, right?
Right. Very true.
Or when you watch an Olympic athlete, or you watch somebody at Olympic caliber just run, you're like, wow, everyone can tell like that guy's got like beautiful posture, like perfect coordinate. So it's not mysterious to us either. So that's the biggest reason something like Taijiquan was kind of chosen almost by the government, right, to be promoted as a health art.
Right.
So I mean, you can tailor Taiji to different levels. There was other considerations, but they're like, wow, these guys practice all the time. They're in good shape in the world, right? And that was really the catalyst for making it something for your health. So if they were good fighters and destroying themselves, they wouldn't have said, well, let's have everyone do that for health, right? So it's going to go hand in hand. If you're say just from a basic martial perspective, if I can generate maximum force, say in a blow, right? We're going to presuppose my body's lined up correctly in gravity, my structure's correct, I have the exact right amount of tension, relaxation, you know, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that obviously that's going to be, it's going to have to be according to my design,
right?
The way I'm designed,
right?
And that's going to be good for you in general. It just couldn't be anything else, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're slumping over and you have terrible posture, shoulders hunched up, can't hit very hard. You know, you're holding yourself back. You're not using yourself in kind of an optimal manner. Well, obviously, using yourself as you're designed correctly has got to be good for you. Can't be bad for you.
Yeah, agreed. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So you can get, again, all those benefits without ever throwing a punch at a human if you do the forms correctly, for example, or you do your qigong correctly. That's what it should be.
Right.
You know, is how it should be.
Okay. Well, that thank you for that. That does help. It helps me frame it too. Just, you know, better understanding it. And so if let's just say, you know, so if people are practicing for health on one side and say fighting on the other, and the middle ground is the good mechanics, like good mechanics are going to be needed for both. Is there a way to lean more, if you wanted to say accentuate the health benefits and lean into that, are there, I guess, methodologies or approaches to foster that? Or is it sort of just like you just stay on that middle turf? You know, you stay on that, you know, just that mechanic train.
So there's a couple things. You have to test everything. If you want to, I'll use Taiji again, Taiji Chuan as an example again. If you want the benefits of Taiji Chuan, you have to practice it like a martial art because that's where the benefits came from, right? Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you have to fight anyone. You don't even have to push hands with anyone. But if you're going to do the forms and the supplementary training, the basic training, and get the benefit that the people who, you know, back in the day, the creators or the top guys had, or that kind of, you've got to do it like them. Yeah. So you can't say, well, you know, they did Taiji this way, but I can just kind of wave my arms around and slump over, and it's tight. It's not. It's a specific martial art with specific principles. If you follow, you have to follow those principles to get that benefit, right? That would seem self-evident. Mm-hmm. Now, without ever fighting. So what you have to have, though, is in general, you'll need to be tested, like posture tested, for example. Mm-hmm. So say you go into like you're in some kind of Taiji position. You don't have to even know how it's used, but you have to know which way your intent would be going and what's the flow of momentum, or else you're not doing Taiji, right? Mm-hmm. Moving around slowly in random patterns is not a Taiji trend. It's not the martial art of Taiji, right? Yeah. So, you know, your teacher teaches you the right sequence, and then he puts some pressure on. Maybe he just puts some weight on your hand, or he pushes your hips, right? And you'll start to get the kinesthetic sense of, oh, okay, that's my power line. This is the way I have to put my intent. And once you've done that for a while, you'll have correct martial form with absolutely no idea of how to fight. It doesn't matter. Like I said, you can use it for health. But, right. You know, a lot of people get the idea. It's like, well, it's whatever I want it to be. It's I'm soft, I'm flowing. That's absolutely not correct. Yeah. You need to do it as it was designed. You could do the same thing with any martial art. You could practice boxing combos. You could practice anything. Right. But you're not going to learn how to move your body correctly and have all those benefits unless you're doing it as it was designed as a martial art, right? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you can learn that middle ground, so you get really good mechanics. Mm-hmm. But how do you know it? How do you know? There's a obviously in all martial arts, but a huge emphasis on a mind-body unity idea and internal especially, right? Right. So you're like Xing Yi Chuan is the name of the style, right? It's the shape of your intent, those kind of things. So it's implied in all these styles. So how do you do that? So you use your intent. They say use your intent, not brute force, all those things. So how do you know you're using your intent correctly, right? You're tested. So your teacher, anyone with, you know, some ability, I could kind of push on your frame and I could tell if you're resisting because you're stronger or if you're lined up to where the power is flowing through your structure into the ground, for example. So those are easily tested with someone who knows what they're doing, right? Right. Then when you feel it, and your teacher might give you some, you know, postural cues, drop your shoulder, drop your elbow, imagine you're extending your hand, imagine, you know, a balloon's pulling your head, and it's not that hard to get. And then you test it, and now, bam, your intent and your movement are united. And then you go through the forms of your exercises like that. It's not that long before you have real internal power, whether you want to use it on anybody or not, right? Yeah. So that would be taking that middle ground, real martial arts training, into more of a health arena. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Or then you say, look, now we're going to start sparring or drilling. Now it would be a fighting arena. But the middle ground, yeah, that's a very good way to put it. You're not doing it as a health. You're not doing these martial arts as a health practice unless you're doing them correctly as a martial art from the foundation, right? Yeah. Yeah, because I think this area does get kind of fuzzy. I mean, especially nowadays when it's talked about, there's some wiggle, you know, in the conversation. So it's good to hear you talk about it like this. As we talk about, you know, these terms, you know, we're tossing around the terms internal, external, you know, martial arts. Can you, for the people listening who are,
hearing this conversation and saying, well, what the hell is an internal martial art, and what's the difference between, say, an external martial art? In your estimation, like, how would you describe those?
Well, they're kind of like convenient labels. It depends what you mean by different. I just use the labels like everyone does because people that study the martial arts will have an idea. They'll make associations. Sometimes not really accurate, maybe, but there'll be associations. So, the terms internal and external came in 100 years ago or so for the arts that we do now. So basically, it's usually, probably the most generic way to think of it is a matter of emphasis. So you have some martial arts. Here's the thing: any legit martial art is always going to talk about having correct structural alignment. They're always going to talk about how do you manipulate gravity. They're going to know, it's going to be in the art.
Sure.
But an external martial art might favor strength training early on. And the benefit of that is you get stronger. And if your technique's not that great, you can still get the job done a lot of times, right?
Right.
So, if you're in boot camp for, 3 months as some warrior back in the day, we don't have time to go into deep principles of body. You have to go out and fight with a spear in 3 months. So you give them good structure. You make them really strong. You have them drill basic things. That would be more of an external idea. So the internal, a lot of times too, they're talking more about maybe more relaxed approach. That's a loaded word as well, but more relaxed approach and a little more emphasis, at least in the beginning, on sensitivity, maybe over force. The mind-body unity really should be there with external styles. You got to be paying attention to what you're doing.
Sure.
But there's a lot of emphasis on that. And then they actually, there are different ways to generate force. You know what I mean? Even if everybody has, but say they have optimal alignment, you can generate force different ways. So. And there will be some differences in force generation. And then strategically, the internal idea, probably all martial arts, or they wouldn't be an art originally, but they all would have been designed around, do I have a chance to beat a bigger, stronger guy? If not, why practice it? A bigger, stronger guy can always beat a smaller, weaker guy. So there needs to be the science and art of, if I get good at this, do I have a chance against someone physically stronger? Can I use my force better? I have more sensitivity. Can I get superior leverage and technique? All that. And so internal sometimes maybe, at least as we see it now, would maybe emphasize that a bit more as well, maybe in the beginning of training. So I use my sensitivity above. The golden rule would be not using force against force, that kind of thing. But it depends how you practice it.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not the moniker. It's not the label of, well, I do Bagua, therefore it's internal, and that guy does, Swaijo, therefore it's external. We have labels for convenience because humans like that kind of thing. We like to categorize things quickly so we have a point of view, or we understand. We want to feel like we understand what's being talked about. So you can't explain internal from scratch every time you start a conversation. You know what I mean? So you need these labels. Yeah. But the downside is you can have all kinds of associations and the terms are loaded, and then you start to think, well, this is superior to that because I do, and that's a dangerous thing. So you got to look at the person doing it as well. And how they do it. Again, it's a methodological approach and a matter of emphasis. It's not really what I think they recognized was the guys at the turn of the last century that kind of got together. They recognized a commonality of body use and maybe strategy, even though they had different technical base.
Right.
So they lumped those styles. They were attracted to each other because those styles were easily cross-trained and fit, and they gave that a name. You know what I mean? Like some styles, if you look at, say, Southern Chinese styles, a lot of the Southern styles, their body mechanics are not the same as a lot of Northern styles. It's not inferior or superior at all. But if you've spent, your whole youth doing, say, a certain style, and then you see it's in the South, for example, then you see a Northern Kung Fu style, you can't. It's how much work would it be? You're going to try to change your whole body. It's just too, So you say, if I need to supplement say you know how to strike, you want to throw, you'd find another style that had throws with the same body mechanics as you because you can learn it quicker, right? You can always accumulate a skill on top of something you already know, and that's kind of what they did, I feel. And then they just gave it a name. Yeah,
well said. What was interesting too is that at the last workshop, at Jared's place in Arizona when we were there training, and you did that. You did that the push, where I said, you were pushing the guys in the class from a very short distance, and I'm 6'2", 260. I'm considerably bigger than you are, and I remember saying, Tim, can you do that? Can you push me? Just do that. And you were just talking about body mechanics, essentially. Like, it's not magic. It's just good body mechanics, and if the body loads appropriately. But I felt like, when you pushed me and I, you hucked me and people caught me, I remember thinking, God, here's a guy smaller than I am, it didn't feel hard either. That was the kind of,
right.
that was, at least for me, that was kind of the mindfuck where I thought, God, he didn't push hard, but you launched me pretty easily. And it was just that principle of good body mechanics. And
when I pushed you, it was magic. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's just
it sure felt like it.
So you were about
yeah.
It's just a matter of like using your body correctly and leverage and the right angles and that kind of thing. And then you have to have a lot of the training's in sensitivity, so it's kind of like I can find your center, all that stuff. But it's trained like any other skill. So you're about 100 and some pounds heavier than me, right?
Yeah.
So, that's what I mean. So the art and science of it would be someone my size would have a chance against someone your size, at least, right? If everything worked okay. Now, if we were equal in skill, or I would lose because you're bigger. That's just the way it's still, you'd have to be realistic as well.
Yeah.
So, but you at least should have a chance. If I tried to use brute force against you, you'd just stand there and nothing would happen. I mean, it would be impossible to, because you're strong, you have, you're trained to have a good stance and the whole, so it would have been impossible. So, it's good to, and if once you train and get to that same skill level, which you could get to in not that long of a time, you could easily throw someone 100 pounds heavier than you that far, and you could push people a lot bigger than I could because you're bigger than me, same level of skill, right?
Right.
So that's it's good. That's kind of why I do those things sometimes. So you can go, oh, okay, obviously I'm not doing it because I'm bigger and stronger than you, right? So there's something to that training.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I wasn't giving it to you. I was standing there just, let my weight sit. And I was like, I want to see what this feels like. And it was, it was real. So that was an eye opener for me. And I think it also drove the point home in terms of, I think Jared has been gravitated towards you, now that I've been exposed to you in real time, where I'm definitely gravitating towards you in terms of studying the, Xing Yi, where I think in seeing it, what's been different, I guess, from your approach is that, and I think I asked you this in class too, was, this biomechanical approach of getting your joints stacked appropriately, having the clavicles up a little bit, and keeping the chin tucked, and all of these little things that you do to align your posture and to get it optimally online. You do that really well, and you seem to have found a method to teach those fundamental mechanics to people to help them get into their body in a more optimal biomechanical way. Is that something that you were exposed to, in Taiwan? Like when you were, in China, was that happening, or is that something that you've sort of developed and, perfected over the years as your method?
Well, I got the ideas originally from my teachers, and I didn't come up with it like out of the ether.
Yeah.
But the explanations that I use are pretty much what I've come up with. So my no criticism. All my main teachers were like spectacular teachers and great people. Sure. But they were old school. Most of them are gone, and it was the old school kind of. There wasn't a lot of questions to ask. You weren't asking a lot of questions. You weren't getting. You just kind of got an idea and practiced till you got it. And it took, and it could have been me not understanding them as well. Equally my fault kind of thing.
Right.
But it took me quite. I feel like I developed some real skill fairly quickly because I had the real deal method, I guess, and I practiced hard. But when I started to get a real handle on it, I was like, you know what, you can learn this a lot fast. So when I came back to teach, one of my prime directives was, if someone puts in the same time, they definitely should be able to get it a lot faster than I got it, or I'm not a very good teacher. So my job was to streamline that whole process, I felt. So what I did was, as I started teaching over the years, I'd pay close attention to what people responded to. When I gave them a cue, or we did a drill, and I just kind of made, I just kept track of it all. And then certain images or certain drills or certain things I said would resonate with more people more quickly. So I would tailor my instruction to those, those things, those cues or those drills. And then I started teaching a lot of seminars kind of over a weekend kind of thing. And I would say to myself, okay, some of these people, they might train with me over time or in seminars, but a lot of these people I'm never going to see again. Like, how can I convey something, hopefully at least, ideally, how can I convey something of use to them that they can get in a weekend that will help them with whatever else they do forever? I would have this idea. It might have been romantic, right? Yeah. But I had that idea. Yeah. So I would think, how can I convey? Then I started to think along the lines of, like when I teach jiu-jitsu seminars, you get a bunch of guys who've done jiu-jitsu for years. I can just teach techniques because they know basic. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can show them variations and they just pick it up because they've got. But a lot of people that I taught that did other things, a lot of times I felt like their just overall body use was not as good as it could have been. A lot of times, some people were, everything was dialed in, but so I thought, okay, I wanted to start with I ask people sometimes, like in their style, I go, what are the basics? And I usually get things about standing in stances and moving your arms around in space. It's never the correct answer, in my opinion. So what you want to start with first is just your basic body alignment. Can you line your body up correctly? And you have a kind of like mind-body unity going on, right? Mm-hmm. Can you position yourself correctly in gravity? So those things, all the movements in the world are never going to be optimal unless you have that down first, right? So I started to tailor a lot of that's why I'm very repetitive in the seminars. I always start with these basic alignment things, the basic mind-body unity ideas, where you put your weight, and then we start with basic movements. So over the years, I've kind of hopefully at least streamlined it into that kind of thing.
You definitely have. I mean, and I have to, just kind of give you kudos for that because, it's really a breath of fresh air in terms of, I started this stuff in my early 20s, just playing with it for health, and I love the way it makes me feel. But, when I met you the first time, and, this is no slam, again, like kind of what you said to my previous teachers and whatnot, but that first, 5 to 7 minutes of you walking me through Santisha and just talking about where my weight was, what my chest, the tiniest little alignments that you gave me for my spine, the back thigh being vertical, the front one angling back a little bit, those things and that dynamic pressure between the legs, those fundamental things that you gave me within 5 to 7 minutes, I thought, well, shit, I just got more out of that than I did, say, 5 years in previous things I had studied because it was
it's nice.
Yeah, it was great. It was like, it was liberating to have that happen. And I thought, boy, you've really honed this down. And I think that's why there's momentum. Like when you teach, I thought, damn, this is great because it was an eye opener. I thought, God, here are some simple things that you have distilled down over the years that made my body way more accessible to me quickly, And that feels good. That feels good on my frame, for a big guy I've got limitations because of being big, but I thought, damn, this also really turns the table, like in a good way, Well,
that's great. Mission accomplished for me. That's what I wanted. People ask me about, they want to teach and like, what do you need to do? Really? You can learn pedagogy, you can learn ways to teach, but here's what I feel it boils down to. If you want to teach, for example, or anyone listening, wants to teach, and if you're already taught a long time, you'll know this, but you really only have to have two things. You have to understand what you're talking about. You really have to have an understanding of what you're doing. You know what I mean? It's internalized. You practiced it, or in martial art, you fought, you tried it. So you've got, a real understanding. And the only other thing you need, you have to have a real desire, like a real, like overriding passion for other people understanding what you're saying. Like you really want them to get it. Not that, because you meet teachers, and I met them in the jiu-jitsu world. They're world-class athletes, and they teach because they don't know what else to do. They're famous. They teach jiu-jitsu, and they really couldn't give a shit if anybody got it. Now, they show good technique and all, but they have absolutely no passion for it, and they don't care. Yeah. And it's funny. You'll see these guys, and you'll be like, man, this guy's students must be great and they're not that great because he just doesn't care.
Right.
So you have to have. You don't have to be world champion, but you just have to be at a level of ability that you really understand your stuff, right? But then if you really, really want someone to get it, you will figure out how to convey that information. It's not, and if you pay attention, it's not that hard over time, right?
Yeah.
And so, I really want people to,
get it, yeah.
Well, and also it's partly just my own ego. If I had 100 students, like say I'm good, I've done these things, and I have 100 students that suck after 5 years, whose fault is that?
Yeah.
Right? So it would kill my ego, right? I'd be a terrible teacher. So,
fair enough, yeah.
I really do want people to get it because they're, you see yourself in it, like, you like martial arts, so you see that their passion, you say, okay, this guy wants to, and also, it's my job. I want to be a good teacher. Like, I want my fighters to win. I want my guys to do well. I want people who come in, to learn things, to be stronger and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's really, all you need.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
And then also too, as a teacher, I feel people learn differently, and they have, everyone has kind of the same problems. There's certain things that happen, but you have to kind of individualize the teaching to a certain extent as well.
Sure.
And after you've done it long enough, you're going to kind of see the same problems in people, so you kind of know how to approach the problem with them. So, there you go.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. And, prior to this interview, Tim, I had I had reached out because I was looking forward to this interview, and I was like, I'm looking to pick your brain, obviously, for my own personal edification and learning. But then also, I was talking to people that are like, there were some consistent themes that people were like, that they were, when they heard I was going to interview you, they said, here's a, and this was a theme, like from a number of people, and they said, for people that are coming to, let's just say, the internal arts, or maybe they want to do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, or they're coming to fighting arts, but they're approaching it for health. Maybe they're older, maybe they're starting, like my mom, right? She started Tai Chi when she was 66. She's 70 now. And she loves it. And she's like, I wish I would have found this 20 years ago. But for people that are moving into this realm and they want to learn and they don't have a ton of exposure or maybe none at all, what do you think is sort of like the foundational checklist that people should be looking for if they're going to start this process, right? What would be like the key highlights, that you would say?
I think a little bit like we talked about before. First is you have to be very, very clear on really what your goal is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, completely, because you'll waste a lot of time, and maybe with really good teachers, but it's not what you're looking for. If I want to learn to play guitar and you teach me how to play drums, it's like, it's music, but I never learned to play the guitar, Right. So that's the first thing. It's their responsibility first. Okay. And then you need, and it doesn't mean you got to shop around maybe too. You don't know. So you check people out, you look at a school, the teacher should let you try a class or two, and you kind of see, you should be able to, as soon as you walk in, if it's a bunch of young guys grappling like maniacs and you want to learn Qigong, obviously, right? It's not your place, or vice versa. So you kind of have an idea. Then you go in, you might check out their background or you can look them up online, right? And then you want to try, I wouldn't be signing any long-term contracts. First, you're going to try a few classes or a month, and you'll get the idea. And you also have to be careful sometimes, because a lot of teachers, not good ones, will no matter what you say you want to learn, they'll tell you that's exactly what they teach. You know what I mean? Just to get students. So you have to be very clear on, are they really doing what I'm looking for, kind of thing. And then if you like it, then you just got to practice. And I think a lot of people too, I get a lot of this stuff. Guys are like 35 and they're like, Tim, I'd like to grapple, but I'm too old now. It's like people far underestimate. You just have to start off slowly. You know what I mean? You have to you say, a lot of people that ask me about doing jiu-jitsu and they're in their 30s only. So I didn't start till I was 34. Yeah. And I started training hard, right? And I had my first pro fight, I was 45. Everyone else was 25. So, I trained a lot more than average, but you know what I mean? There's no, you can't, a lot of times too, if you want to do something a little more athletic, just start slowly. You'd be shocked at how much you can improve, what a level you can get to. So that's the other side of it, besides the health part. People out there that are interested in jiu-jitsu, I think everyone likes Brazilian jiu-jitsu, just some people don't know it yet. So, a lot of people, you go out there and train a little bit, and you might really like it. Or any other martial art, you say, I'd really like to do Xing Yi, but the guys at the, I like internal, but they actually spar. That actually, you don't have to, but if you're interested in that and you go to a legit school and you start off slowly, you don't sell yourself short. You can get to, people are always very surprised at what level they can get to. They just go through the right steps in the right order, and they train. Right. You have to train hard, right? Yeah. But don't sell yourself short. A lot of people too, as they get a little older, they're like, I can't do the X anymore. And it's like, you absolutely can if you trained. You can't do it now, right? But in literally 6 months you could. So you don't fall into that trap either.
No, those are great points. I mean, and I would be lying if I said I hadn't fallen prey to that voice a little bit. And it's changed. My attitude has changed toward, especially after talking to you and training with you some. Where and you're right, because people, I think we see UFC fighters doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and we just see these animals, just like
that's a different level,
tearing each other apart, and then everyone's like, well, shit, I'm not doing that, but
you don't have to do that,
right? And you're making a good point, right? Start slow, and things will go well or better.
There's a lot of jiu-jitsu now is based on competition. That's the main thrust, but you'll still find schools that are kind of old school that talk about self-defense, and there's levels of classes, and you start out, it's always hard. There's never like an easy day as far as physical, it's physical, right? Obviously, sure. But if you're into that kind of thing and you like it, but a good teacher's not going to throw you out there with a bunch of like maniac young blue belts or something. Right. You'll start slowly, you'll build up to it, you'll grapple, and then you'll go up in level. And you could learn to defend yourself with any martial art that has the potential to teach that without ever being training at the level of a pro fighter. There's no need to. Right. I'm talking about defending yourself in like an actual fight. Right. There has to be a level of intensity. It doesn't have to be that high. You're talking about fighting the other best guys that can really fight. That's obviously a whole different level of
for sure
intensity, right?
For
so
sure.
yeah, you have to find the right school, that you fit into, but you shouldn't be intimidated.
Yeah.
If that's your goal.
Absolutely. And what do you think, Tim, in terms of in our modern world where, right, we're not in feudal times, we're not using hand-to-hand combat, we're not fighting on the regular, thank God, anymore. But how relevant do you think on a scale of 1 to 10, the average person learning self-defense, like real, relatively applicable self-defense skills, like how important do you think it is nowadays? Because I mean, personally, I think it's important, but I know people will argue like, well, we're not fighting anymore, therefore, like, why should we do this? That kind of a thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it'll be the most important thing you could ever have done if you ever get attacked, right?
I agree.
So it depends. Now, depending on your job and where you live, hopefully you're not going to get assaulted or in a fight.
Sure.
But people do. So here's the good thing about here's the good news about just basic self-defense training. If you go to a place that really emphasizes legit kind of realistic self-defense, a few months of training is probably enough forever.
Yeah.
As long as you're in okay shape. You train hard, say for 6 months consistently, you probably have enough skill. I tell you what, you'd have enough skill to survive most confrontations you might have died in if you hadn't had 6 months of training. Yeah. So you don't want to conflate, I need some basics. And a lot of it's just awareness and understanding like the interview and when people are about to attack. I mean, besides technique, right? All that stuff, that's the most important thing. That's the kind of stuff that will be more likely to save your life. But if you don't have that training, you won't know. So you can't conflate self-defense training for survival in the street with, being a pro fighter. They're not in the same universe. So some realistic self-defense training for even months literally might save your life 10 years later.
Right.
So, whether or not, and you don't want people to be paranoid but still,
of course,
a little, just the awareness of it might be life-saving.
Yeah.
People you see it all the time. People walk right into these dangerous situations and like, I had no idea. It's like, if you had a little training, you wouldn't have gone in there.
For sure.
Or you would have crossed the street or, whatever that is, right? Or you would have checked around your car before you got into it. So just those things alone are invaluable. And just your self-defense, your martial arts in general, your self-defense, your martial arts, all the things you train have to be connected to your genetic self-defense reactions. Yeah, you can only interface. So everybody has self-defense capabilities. Everybody, if you've never done a day of martial arts in your life, right?
Right, it's very true.
So if you have a legit training, you can kind of upgrade those to martial arts very, very quickly because you already have that. It's an inborn response. And you can kind of polish that off, although you can never override it, right? So if you're learning things that are kind of like, I don't want to criticize anyone, but you'll get these kind of unrealistic things and these super difficult techniques. That's never going to work. Yeah. Maybe with years and years of training. So I tell everyone, if you look at like Xing Yi now, they teach you to cover your head, or boxing, or any style where you're really hitting each other. It's based on your natural fear reaction when you hear a loud noise. Next time a car backfires, pay attention to what you do.
Right.
You will lower your hips and you'll cover your head and tuck your chin, right?
Yeah.
So you can train that into being an actual fighting reaction in a fight very, very quickly. So that's kind of how, and it's not only self-defense, all the way in through, like, if you're going to be a pro MMA fighter, that's what real martial arts are based on. So it's not hard to learn. It's with the correct method, it's not hard to learn. And then it will be kind of interfaced with your reactions forever. Now, you might be a little slower or whatever because you haven't practiced it, but the reaction will be like riding a bike, right? The reaction will always be there.
Yeah.
So everyone out there, if you're thinking about learning some real self-defense, I would highly recommend it, even if it's for months.
Yeah. Well, Tim, we'll wrap this up. I have one last question for you, and it's just kind of, I've been curious about this, and we'll let you go. But, with the study of martial arts, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, the thing that's been like the most benefit for me is just, like you said, like I feel like I don't have the mindset. It's not my karmic path to even be like an elite fighter, but I enjoy exploring the fighting applications. But what I've always noticed is that, training these arts and training the fighting arts has always done something really good for my spirit, my disposition, how I interface with people. There's sort of an upliftment that comes from just training the arts, and I love the spirit boost, more or less, that I get from it. Xing Yi in particular really has always done something to my psyche that I can't really put a finger on, but it's always made me feel great. So outside of, the real-time fighting application that you can definitely get from these arts, and I know that you're so well equipped in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, what has it given you in terms of, like day-to-day living, and how, more or less, like what has it done for your spirit and mindset in life, training this stuff?
Well, because I'm a professional martial arts teacher, so obviously it's my whole living kind of thing, right? So I might be an exception in that way, because I don't. It's hard for me to disassociate kind of my career with. I can't with martial arts because I've done it, right?
Fair enough.
So, but that aside, it originally started as a kid because we used to brawl a lot where I grew up, and you tired of getting beat up when you're little, and you're like, hey, you can learn actual something that will give you an edge. That's really how it started. I was interested in it then. Yeah. And then I remember when I was a little kid, the Kung Fu series came out, that kind of, and you're like, wow, everybody thought that, everybody loves Kwai Chang Caine and Bruce Lee. So you see that kind of stuff, and there's an attraction to this. There's an attraction I feel to, and it doesn't have to be Asian. There's like I like the idea of an organized method of training for fighting that at the same time was kind of a way to be a method of self-cultivation. You know what I mean? So even me when I was a kid, I didn't, I wasn't within anything. I didn't think about spiritual. You didn't think about it. I just thought, wow, if I can learn this, I can whip that kid's ass, kind of thing. I won't get beat up. And that's really how it started, right? Yeah. Yeah. But very, very soon, even as a 12-year-old, the discipline of it kicked in, and I could appreciate even at a very young age this kind of discipline, this self-cultivate, and maybe it's not for everyone. I mean, people find different things, but it will of course carry over into every other aspect of your life, right? Yeah. So you have a certain amount of self-discipline, or you practice something. It could be a basic body movement, and you can't get it. You train, and then you get it, and you said, "Shit, I thought I'd never get this, and I got it. Why can't I do something else?" Those, just on a simple level. Yeah. So all those things, and it's good exercise, right? You're actually, getting some exercise. Yep. So I tell everyone, like, the same idea as the self-defense thing. You could learn some decent lifelong self-defense skills in a matter of months, right? Why would you keep doing martial arts after that if that was your goal? Right. If it was your only goal, you wouldn't, but why do most people keep doing it? You might want to compete. I mean, people compete, and it's a sport, it's a combat sport. But the vast majority of people, it's not. There's some level of self-cultivation involved. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like where you would say spiritual, I would say self-cultivation. Yeah. So you're like, you're organizing your psyche. You're learning about mind-body unity. You're giving it the only discipline, self-discipline, right? If I make you do something, that's not discipline. I'm forced you to do it. Yeah. The only discipline, self-discipline. So you're doing things that you might like them, but they're still hard, right? And there's still challenges. And especially if they're anything competitive, like in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, like the biggest thing you'll hear is, if you can't check your ego, you just can't stay in a class, because people, when you first start, everybody beats you up, kind of thing. And even as you can be the best guy, and once in a while you're going to get submitted, or you got to keep your ego in check, and there's always more to learn. So all those things are kind of like lessons in life that sometimes we're not exposed to once we're kind of, in the working world and grown up. We get, we have to go to, you go to work, you take care of your family or whatever, and you get into kind of, it's the rut thing, right? Yeah. And people, I think people, like, they kind of like, their psyche yearns for that kind of self-discipline. It's something that, it's in our psyche, right. And it's another outlet. You could do it with maybe music, you could do it with whatever else, but the martial arts is special in that it's physical for one thing. And if you're doing it, you could do Tai Chi by yourself for health, but when you're training with other people, there's a kind of like, you get connections with other people, which is really nice. And also there's a physical connection, like you're fighting with them, you're sparring with them at whatever level, right? Yeah. There's a test of your, how far your training's come along. And when you're defeated, you need to check your ego, right? It's not his fault. He's supposed to beat me. Like, what do I do to get better? And all those things, I feel we get a lot of it growing up as you're learning your life lessons. You play sports in school, and then a lot of times they stop. And I feel like, if you don't have time to train, you don't have time to train. But just training a couple, 3 days a week in a martial art, that's you get a continuation of those life lessons, like hands-on continuation, as long as you'd like, all the way till you're old. And as you get older and older, you can modify the amount of activity, or you tone down the sparring, obviously, but you can still try to keep. You can help. Then you can teach, or you can help. Spread, disseminate whatever knowledge you have. So there's like a lifelong thing in it if you want it. And it's not the only way, but of course, I'm partial to it because it's what I've done. I don't really know any other way, right? Sure. Other ways might be I just don't know about it. But I understand I can see the common thread like that yearning in the psyche for a kind of self-discipline. So that's a big part of it. And even people who don't realize it, they're doing it. You know what I mean? Even if it's not completely conscious at the time.
Right. It gets a hold of them, by osmosis, it grabs a hold of them.
Yeah.
Awesome, Tim. Well, if people want to, Tim, if they want to follow your work and kind of, see what you're doing, where can people kind of find you online? Social media, websites, like where can they?
So I don't have a huge social media, but if they Shenwu, SHENWU is the name of my old school and the name of like my organization. So if you Google me or Shenwu, you'll find information. Okay. And I teach the Jiu-Jitsu Academy is Ace Jiu-Jitsu, ACE, Ace Jiu-Jitsu. It's in Fountain Valley in Southern California. So you can find me through the Ace Jiu-Jitsu site, that kind of thing. And then my website is shenwu.com. It's an old website. I primarily use it just to sell DVDs and things. There's no new information on it, but there's bios on it and things. So if anyone's interested, that would be probably the best way to go about it.
Okay, awesome. Well, Tim, thank you for taking the time. I know you're kind of an in-demand guy.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and
my pleasure.
I really appreciate, just on a personal note, what you're doing for the martial arts world and the scene. I mean, it's moved me. I know I'm not the only one, and I know the fighters that you're training. I mean, they're getting just amazing teaching from you. So I appreciate it, and I know a lot of people do too. And I just want to say thank you because you've helped me tremendously deepen my practice, and that's I'm just very appreciative. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Tim.
All right, guys.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.